I'm Beverly, and I'm on the witness stand. Welcome everybody back to the witness stand, and today we are going to go through the first week of the Lindsay Clancy murder trial. This is a tough one, guys. This is the kind of trial I really don't like talking about because it's very heartbreaking and very upsetting to me, and it's going to be a tough trial all the way through it. However, it is one that's made national news that we really should pay attention, and it also brings a very serious mental health issue to light, and hopefully medical professionals will take this case and do something to help these people, these women that are suffering from this particular disease. And I call it a disease because I don't know what else there is. So let's get into it. Lindsay Clancy was 34 years old. She may be 34 now, but she's 34-year-old labor and delivery nurse. On January 24th, 23, she murdered her 3 children. It was Cora, age 5, and Dalton, age 3, and little Callan, age 8 months. All 3 with an exercise band that was tied around their neck. And what the father said, it was like tying a shoe without the bow. But she wasn't finished. When she got through, she went upstairs with a knife and she sliced her wrist and she sliced her throat. And then she jumped out of a second-story window. She had severe injuries and paralyzed. It's heartbreaking. What's interesting about this case is she was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder, 3 counts of strangulation, suffocation, and assault and battery with a dangerous weapon. So what's the defense? Let's talk about the opening statements before we do anything else. Prosecution went first, and they laid out the situation, what happened, step by step, and they laid it out as if this was premeditated murder, and how they described this went about was that she planned everything, including that she researched takeout options before sending her husband out to pick up said takeout. She allegedly chose a time when she would be alone with the children and the exercise bands used in the killings, and then the relatively short window in which the events occurred. The jury is likely to hear from Patrick Clancy, the children's father. He remarried. Police officers will be testifying, first responders, medical examiners, psychiatrists, and psychologists for both sides, her treating physicians, and mental health providers, investigators who collected digital evidence. The defense, in his opening statement, I have to say, immediately gave me thoughts of her not being guilty of premeditated murder. Now, as trials go along, things change, and I'm not going to sit here and say one way or the other how I feel. I'm just saying that in opening statements alone, it gave me pause to think about. I'm open to the rest of the trial, and I will listen intently to the testimony given. But the defense argues that she was suffering from severe postpartum mental illness, including the possibility of postpartum psychosis. They said she had been under psychiatric care. This is not disputed. These are facts. She had been prescribed multiple psychiatric medications. Her mental illness left her unable to appreciate the wrongness of her actions. They said that this was a catastrophic failure of mental health care. The jury heard that she was seen by a number of professionals, including obstetric providers, therapists, psychiatrists, and specialized mental health clinicians. They said that she followed mental health advice through her period of illness. Patrick Clancy helped her all the way through. He was supportive and he helped her as much as possible. I cannot see how this man could have done anything more to help her through her postpartum. The attorney for Lindsay described all of these medications that she was taking. They were providing all of this medication without really realizing what was going on with her. They were not recognizing the true nature of her illness. So among the medications that were given to her, and I'm going to read this list off, it's not all of them, but among them: Zoloft, Prozac, Remeron, I may be saying that wrong, Remeron, I don't know, Trazodone, Seroquel, Ativan, and Klonopin. And these are sedative medications to treat a lot of different illnesses, but among some, it is for anxiety and depression. The defense argued that she was misdiagnosed and mistreated. That became the strongest headline in the entire theme. It was tough. The doctors never fully appreciated how ill she had become. They treated symptoms rather than the underlying conditions. She should have received more intensive psychiatric intervention. She was sent home repeatedly from hospitals and institutions instead of being hospitalized for the level of care that the defense believed she needed. The implication was that the medical system failed her before the tragedy occurred. Prosecutors are expected to argue, like we said before, she researched takeout options, the exercise bans, relatively short window, and chose a time when she would be alone. This case sits at the intersection of postpartum or severe postpartum depression versus a postpartum psychosis. It's going to center on criminal responsibility, mental illness, and the insanity defense, and how the courts evaluate competing psychiatric experts. One of the things I want to talk about is that Patrick Clancy, the husband of Lindsay and the father of the 3 children, again, he helped her in every way possible, and he testified in support of Lindsay, not against her, which may be difficult to understand. However, he did. There was a 911 call that was played. It was from Patrick to dispatch, 911 dispatch. Patrick asked and was granted the opportunity to leave the courtroom when it was played. He left the courtroom and he was brought back to the witness stand after the recording had been done and had been played, and then they took a break. Okay, the judge also ordered that the media, which they are in the courtroom and they are televising, but the media was not allowed to play that video, nor was it to be recorded, nor was it to be published anywhere subject to prosecution. It was that unnerving, that disturbing, and that heartbreaking. While the 911 call was played, they focused on Lindsay. The camera focused on Lindsay. She was devastated. She was unnerved and extremely emotional, crying, and she would turn away from the jurors. It's as if she couldn't face anybody, as she did when the prosecution held up the clothes that the children were wearing that night and held up the clothes of Lindsay. She couldn't bear to look at it. There were times when Patrick testified that she couldn't look. She just couldn't look at him, and you could see that she was distraught. According to people that listened to it in the trial, and this was okay, the judge okayed this, they said that it was Patrick coming in, not finding anybody, going into the master bedroom and finding the window open, which he thought was unusual. He looks out, he runs to the backyard, and he finds Lindsay laying on the ground, severely hurt. but not bleeding that much. Not as much as you would think for a throat and wrist to be cut. It was snow on the ground. And I keep wondering if the extreme cold had anything to do with the bleeding at that moment, because in the master bedroom was blood, and Patrick said it appeared to be sprayed. So I just wonder if that had something to do with it. Nobody testified to that it was potentially due to the cold. I do not know. However, they did show pictures of her wounds while she was in the hospital, and I thought that the wounds were substantial on her wrist, although I didn't think that it was deep enough to hit arteries. But I also thought it was significant. But first responders testified that they did not treat those wounds because they were not bleeding. I think that the neck wound was very significant according to the pictures. However, first responders again said that it was not actively bleeding when she was there. They testified that she went in and out of consciousness, and she was making noises but wasn't really talking. Now, when Patrick found her and he evaluated her situation, he said, "Where are the kids?" She said, "In the basement." He called 911, so they were on the phone with him when he was there with Lindsay. He went down in the basement. They were still on the phone with him when he discovered all three of the children. And he tried his best to help. He untied the bands, and the only one that was showing any kind of pulse was Callan. He was doing everything he could, including, I think they said he was doing CPR, but the two children were gone, and Callan died. He was not able to be resuscitated, or not able to be, maybe it was resuscitated, but they could not keep him alive. But the recording was so heartbreaking, so emotional. He was screaming. The first responders heard him screaming, and they came down and they started fire, police, paramedics, EMTs, everybody descended upon that house. And they called for what they said was mutual aid, which they did not have enough ambulances and medical personnel to come to the scene. So what that was is they have an agreement between local or towns that they would bring in what they called mutual aid. They would come and help. Patrick was so distraught that he ended up being taken to the hospital also. What the prosecution did all week long was bring in cops, paramedics, EMTs, fire personnel, multiples, not just one, that were on scene. And they described the scene and what they did for the children over and over again. Nothing changed. All of the descriptions were relatively the same. I did not like that. I felt like there was no point to that many people testifying, but that was the whole week, short of Patrick Clancy, which I have to tell you, he held himself together through almost all of it. He broke down when he testified about the children. They asked him to tell the court about his children. He described Cora as being a little princess, and he was very emotional through that. He described Dylan as being active and that he loved, I think he said, trucks and things like that. And then he described Callan as a very happy baby. That was the part that he couldn't keep himself together with. But the rest of it, he testified by answering the questions, not showing so much emotion, with the exception of what I said. Matter of fact, and I think that he had prepared himself to do just that and not show or not break down, to try to keep it together. But Lindsay was having a hard time, especially when describing the children and how they were found. And as I said, she would look away from the jury and her hair was hanging down so you could not see her face. It was a tough week, a very tough week. Defense did not ask hardly any questions when they were able to direct. And I think it spoke for itself. The defense is not saying, they're not disputing what happened. They're not disputing who did it. They're disputing why. And that's going to be central to this case. So I'll be watching this week and I will update you at the end of the week as to where this goes and keep you updated. Major happenings, I will come online and give you shorts about. In the meantime, this is a tough case. Prepare yourself. And as for now, you may step off the witness stand. I'm Beverly, and I'm on the witness stand.